welcome to my podcast on real relationships. My name is Sophie Passon and I am a relationship expert, international speaker and best-selling author of a book, Your Other Half. I decided to start this podcast because, in my opinion, relationships are currently not being portrayed as what they really are. Whether you're watching the news, TV, social media, the perception given to people is wrong. And my aim is to talk about what happens in the real world, talk about real stories, and listen to what real people think, do, or go through, as opposed to creating expectations of something that doesn't actually exist. I may not agree with everything that is said by my guest, but it is their chance to express their opinions and their stories. And here today, we are going to talk about parents and the mental health of children these days. And what we're going to do that with is Stacey Miller. Hi, Stacey.
Hi, Sophie. Thanks for having me on today.
No worries at all. So, for the benefit of everybody else, could you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Stacey Miller, business name Stacey Miller Consultancy. And in a nutshell, I work in training and education. So training lovely professionals in education, working a lot with young people in schools. And also I host a lot of conferences for professionals and for young people.
Mm-hmm. So parents and kids' mental health, why is the importance, first of all, of a relationship between the parent and the child so important in respects to that?
It's so important. If you think about where a young person is their point of call for any problems, really, and how we learn to cope with things, it is from our parents. But I think parents can sometimes feel like they're alone with that kind of thing. They might sometimes think, am I the only parent that has a child that's potentially not coping very well or has anxiety? And I think it's really important to stress that actually they're definitely not alone. You know, statistically, 1 in 10 young people have a mental health problem, 1 in 10. So that's roughly, 3 young people in every single tutor group. Mm-hmm. So that's quite a lot of young people. I also think, like statistics as well, these are the figures we know about. So actually thinking about it, it's probably a lot more than that, really. So it's really important just to stress straight away that, you know, young people and mental health, it is unfortunately getting worse, and parents need to realise that there is loads of stuff out there, like support-wise for them and for young people, and that they're just not alone. I think it's really important that they know that.
So there's lots of points, you know, and things that people, I'm sure, you know, want to say as much as I do. I think one of them is, first of all, I was in the gym the other day. Well, actually, I wasn't in the gym. I was in the jacuzzi. And I was listening to 3 older women who were just chatting in general about, you know, youth and how, you know, they wouldn't want to be young nowadays and how much pressure there is on kids, blah, blah, blah. And obviously we're going to go through all of these points in a minute. But if I go back to them, or even my own generation to a degree, I don't recall people suffering with mental health as much as they do now at a young age.
You know what, it's so interesting. So I'm doing a lot of mental health lessons in schools at the moment. And I say to young people, like, mental health is like, it's become massive over the sort of last 10, 20 years. My question to you is why? And it's so interesting. So I've just finished 24 lessons in this school recently, 24. And out of 24, all 24 said to me their first reason was social media. So that's fascinating.
You know, put my finger on that one because it's an obvious thing, and I actually think it's also an issue to a degree with adults for a number of reasons, because I think we unconsciously compare ourselves all the time, and even if you are reasonably quote unquote successful, whether that means anyway, you can feel a little bit like, you know, you're not doing so well. And I think the other issue with social media is that everybody appears to have an opinion which is apparently more important and better than your own, and that's adults as kids.
Oh yeah, I mean I feel really glad and lucky that I'm not being brought up as a young person now. You know, everything is documented. You know, you can't really get away with a lot of things because we're all silly sometimes when we're young, but that's just a part of being young, you know, whereas everything is documented online now. You know, once it's out there, okay, you can maybe even delete the post, but actually it's still out there, you know.
Because all it needs is someone to screenshot it.
I know, it's scary. It's so scary.
But
So
do
it's
you
interesting with social media. Yeah,
do
go
you
for it.
think that maybe, and I'm just putting this out there, that actually, because you just said something that just made me click in my head about
Yeah,
being a child, and
yeah,
actually, is it that they're growing up too quickly? That they end up with all of these problems that are more adult problems, really, than they are a child thing? Because when I was 8, I played with my Barbies and my dolly. Nowadays, at
yeah.
8 years old, they don't really do that. Or do you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. They want to be adults, but at the
Mm.
same time, they don't want the responsibility that comes with it. You know, I think
Why do
the
they do that?
main thing with social media is the comparison.
Mm.
You know, like the worst social media platform for mental health has got voted a couple of years ago is Instagram. And again, I'll say to young people, so hands up if you're on Instagram, you know, and I would say probably a good 90% of them are Instagram. And a lot of them are like 12, 13, you know, where actually
And they're
it's
on
not
that
even.
more than Facebook as well. It's more
Oh, well, Facebook for
generation,
them is for
isn't
their
it?
parents. So they don't really use Facebook. It's Snapchat and Instagram
Mm.
that young people are on. And obviously, Instagram is all about, you know, looking amazing. And they follow all these celebrities who have this pretend perfect life that look the perfect body and all the rest of it. And it's fake, you know, it's not real. And also it's quite addictive as well. Sort of social, I know it is for me as an adult, you know, one of the first things I do when I wake up in the morning, I go on my social media. So, you know, I'm a bit guilty of it as well, really, but I'm not, my resilience is okay. Whereas I think with young people, their resilience isn't great at dealing with all the hate.
We're teaching them the wrong stuff to a degree, because what sort of value is it that you look good on Instagram? It's sure
Oh,
it's
I
not
think,
a purpose in life, is it?
yeah, it's sad. It really is that, you know, we're brainwashed a bit, really, when you
Mm.
think about it, to look a certain way, to be a certain way. But yeah, I think we've all got to let that go, really. But that's very difficult when the world is constantly telling us that we have to be a certain way. So yeah, young people definitely struggle with social media for their own well-being, but at the same time, they love it. They're on it all the
Mm.
time, you know.
And obviously, childhood is something that very much defines us, because whenever someone's got an issue later on in life, it often stems back from childhood. So,
Oh, absolutely.
are we
And that would be
creating?
one of my bits of advice with young people is, especially from a parent's perspective, you know, think about why there is mental health issues. And obviously that potentially could be deep rooted. But is it because of school? Is it because of bullying? Is it because of the media? If we can work out or unpick a little bit why, then we can sort that out. So if, for example, if they've got a lot of anxiety because of exams at school, then it might be, well, talk to the school about maybe getting them a bit more extra support or putting
Mm.
less pressure on them, you know? It doesn't have to be rocket science stuff.
When you say, you know, unpicking, I agree, but I think that unfortunately there's so much that's completely all interlinked together. I think, you know, there's society, there's expectations, there's judgment, there's social media, and all of that is actually, it's kind of a chicken and the egg. Which one comes first, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's definitely loads of different things. I mean, if you think about any of us, why we get anxious or stressed, it's never just because of one thing, is it? There's always loads of stuff. But it's just about looking after yourself, you know, simple self-care stuff. And this is one of the biggest things, don't wait until it's a problem, you know. Add fuel to that tank all the time. Don't wait until you're on a burnout to go, oh, okay, I might tackle my mental health now. You know, do it even when you feel great. Keep on trying to make yourself feel great. Because when a little curveball is chucked, you'll be able to deal with it better.
So,
But
as
people
a
don't.
parent, what sort of
Yeah.
signs do you need to look out for if a child, you know, you're suffering from mental health, but you don't necessarily know? Because I expect not all the kids are going to tell their parents.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And also as well as parents, we can get a bit confused with, is our child just being a teenager, you know, or are they like not coping? So, you know, a young person going in their room at night and not wanting to talk to their parents, okay, they might be anxious, but actually that might be just because they're being a teenager, you know.
Yeah.
So we have to be mindful of that. I think the massive bit of advice I would give with any kind of, for parent and their mental health, is to be aware of any changes. So if you have a child and you know that they have a good appetite, for example, and you've noticed they're not eating, well, that's a big indicator that something's not right. Okay, it's the same with sleep. If you know that they sleep really, really well, but you've started to notice that they're waking up really early, well, that's not right. So, but at the same time, you know, it's about key changes, basically. So, you know, some young people say, but I don't sleep very well. And I'm like, well, in that case, if you slept more, that would be a key change to like look out for. And just not being able to cope with little things. I think that's really key as well.
And how would you advise they broach the subject? Because that's not easy with a teenager either.
Yeah, that is a really good point. Because one of the worst things we can do, it's a bit like with sex education when we talk to kids about sex, we don't sit down and have the talk, you know, let's sit down and we're going to have the talk about sex.
The bird, yeah.
It's the same with mental health. We should make it constantly ongoing. So use opportunities. So it could be that there's something in a soap
on TV or whatever, yeah.
Yeah, and if you're really stuck, this is something I do, is I might just go onto Google News. I did it with a relative of mine recently. I was a bit worried. I noticed a couple of cuts on her arms, right? And her mum was like, oh, what do I do? You know, like really worried about it. So I just went on to Google News and put in self-harm. And I saw that there was some stuff that had come up in the press about it. So I used that as an opportunity to go, oh, I read this thing today. And I thought, what do you think? You know, and it just opened the dialogue, really. Yeah. And I thought I'd just play it by ear, see if she wanted to talk to me. I made sure that her mum wasn't around as well, because I didn't think she'd want to talk to me if her mum was around. But yeah, use opportunities, but make it constant. Even when your kids are little, you know, talk about like, you know, emotions that like, you know, what is an emotion? You know,
and I think there's two key things that you've just put your finger on here. First of all, is that you should have good communication when they're little, because it's too late when they're 12 or 13. And also that sometimes as a parent, you can recognise the problem, but you may not be the right person for them to talk to. So getting them to talk to an aunt or an uncle or whatever may be the way forward.
Definitely. We all need an outlet. And so I do a lot of like parents' evenings in schools, and parents say to me, my child won't talk to me. And I'm like, don't worry. Like, don't see that as a really bad thing. Like, maybe see if there's anyone in your friendship or family that they would talk to. And if they still struggle to get that child to talk, get them a diary, write it down. I did one recently where I bought like a gratitude. I'm a massive fan of gratitude. Gratitude journal. You've only got to go to W.H. Smith. There's millions of journals out there for young people, because we all need an outlet, don't we? And I always say to young people, like, if you can't talk about how you feel, don't worry, just write it down, because then it's like the next best thing, isn't it?
And I think this is the thing, isn't it? Once it's out, it's not in your mind all the time going around in circles.
Definitely. Like just young people with sleep. Like I did an assembly yesterday with about 300 young people, and I said, right, put your hand up if you struggle with sleep. And a good half of them put their hand up. And I just thought, wow, like, and that a lot of that is screen time, and you know, they're not switching off and things like that. Their mind's just an anxiety. So I said, look, try and write stuff down before you go to bed, because then it's out. Like you say, it's out, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then it's not stewing in your head, basically. It's almost as good as talking about it.
And in terms of expectations now, there is a fine line, because obviously as a parent, you would want to push your children to do well and not to be lazy and a bum. But at the same time, too high expectations, whether it's at school or anything, is also not healthy. So how do you balance?
It is, and I would be really careful about pressure as well, because schools more and more now are putting more pressure on young people. So, for example, even with year sixes now, when they do their SAT exams,
what sort of age is that?
So that's like sort of 10.
Right.
So I will sometimes, so I did some work with some like year 4, year 5s recently, which is like 9, 10. And I had to really break down like stress and being upset and stuff. And I was like, so, do any of you get a bit stressed or worried about things? And they all put their hand up, and they were all like, oh, we've got exams and we don't know how we're going to cope with it. And I just thought, God, you're like 9, 10 years old and you're already not feeling like you can't cope. So
Now,
that's really sad. That's really sad.
The devil's advocate a little bit here. Could we maybe even argue that's a little bit of a first world problem, and that everybody kind of is jumping on the bandwagon on that one a little bit? Because sometimes I hear people saying about mental health and I'm just like, you have no issues compared to some people.
Yeah.
And I was listening to something on you recently. I was listening to something on you recently on the TV. Was it the TV, the radio, wherever it was? Because there's a chap from Portsmouth who died, was buried yesterday, and he was a veteran who obviously was sent to the beaches in Normandy when he was only 16, 17. And there were a number of people talking and saying people from today wouldn't cope with that level of monstrosity and things to see and dying and whatever. So are we mollycoddling kids too much as well?
Happy to do devil's advocate, because I think it's really important we look at lots of different sides to this, and I would agree with you. I do think we are starting to go the other way now. Babying a little bit too much. I hear young people all the time say to me, I'm anxious, I'm depressed. And I think, you don't know what that is. And actually, it's really normal to feel anxious. Like, anxiety is totally normal. It's, when it affects your day-to-day life, that's the problem. But yeah, that's interesting that you said that. I do, only because I love tough love, and I've got lots of empathy for people. I love helping people. I'm all about kindness, but at the same time, I think it's about the balance and actually just empowering people to just take a bit of ownership.
And that's what I was about to say. I think my concern personally for the next 20 years is that people are always looking for someone to blame for anything that goes wrong, and people don't take responsibility. And to a degree, that anxiety is a symptom of that, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, I couldn't agree more. If you think about, like, people are just very negative and they blame. But actually, anyone successful and really happy in life is very proactive, and they don't. So if you look at like cognitive behavioural therapy, there's loads of different unhelpful thinking styles, and one of them is blaming. It's personification, I think it's called. But yeah, it's that blame. It's really unhelpful, but we do it a lot. So I do feel like we do need to take a bit of ownership. And because people don't do it. So I taught some CBT lessons not long ago, the year 8, so that's like 12, 13. And I thought, God, these young people are going to get so much out of it. But they didn't, because they want you to just fix them.
Yeah.
And the world that we live in, they're very much like they want everything now or like yesterday. They're not willing to see the long term. If you put in the graph now, then you're going to lead a lovely life, but you need to look after your mental health now.
And I think I get why, if you just take ordering something online, I haven't got Amazon Prime because I just don't.
No.
But if something takes 10 days to get here because I've ordered it online and it's taken 5 to 10 days, I am grumpy. I think we have become so used to having things now that we don't understand the concept of, as you just said, putting in a bit of graft first to get a result. And unfortunately, that's just the way it works.
Yeah, and this generation as well, like our generation, we've only just been used to that instant gratification, probably like in our adulthood, whereas kids,
but you get used to it quickly.
Yeah, so we're a bit different. Whereas with young people now, that from literally the time they're born, they're used to that straight away. So to them, that's very normal. Whereas we're not. It's different for us, I think. So if you're brainwashed to think that's constantly normal, then that's tricky. That's really, really difficult.
And in terms of mental health as well, so now going devil advocate the other way sort of thing, there's a lot of youngsters that want to fit in and be like everybody else and have the perfect body and whatever. But then on the other end of the scale, you've got the ones who really want to stand out. But that can also cause mental health issues to a degree because we're now completely different.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of that going on at the moment, especially around identity.
Oh yeah.
That's normal. If you look at like Erik Erikson's theory, stages of development, when you're a teenager, you have almost like an identity crisis because you're trying to figure out who you are. But again, that's normal. Again, but it's just expanded a lot more now, isn't it? Because of like, you know, are you a female? Are you not? You know, are you gay? Are you not? That's a lot more talked about now. Gender identity and
I think maybe that's to do with it as well, is the fact that now we do talk about it, where before we didn't. So that creates a new problem, maybe, let's say, with the fact that we speak more about it, because it's a bit like, you know, when we're talking about saying it or writing it down, the problem is the minute you say or write it down, you make it real because you voiced it. And when you haven't, you could feel, oh no, I don't really have a problem because it's not out there. But it's the same the other way around and the other side of the coin. If you start talking about various issues, it's a bit like, for instance, at the moment, I've got this itch. It's only on the shoulders and the top of my back and my ankles. It's only in the morning and it's only in the evening. I've got no idea why. I have no rash. I have nothing, right? But it's really itchy. If I Google it, trust me, well, A, I'm an alcoholic. B, there's something else, and I probably have cancer and should just like shoot myself now. So this is the other thing. When we start to put information out there, you then can identify with a lot of things that aren't true. Or not
you have to
relevant to
what's on the internet. Yeah, you've got to be careful what's on the internet. I think we forget that anyone can have a website at the end of the day, so we have to make sure it's credible. That's very, very important. And I would go for the advice for parents when they try and get advice. I'm happy to give websites and stuff that I recommend, but I would
I'll put the links in the notes that go with this.
Yeah, brilliant. Because there's, you know, so something else that I really want to stress as well is that you look at the media about mental health. We're very quick to say, funding cuts have stopped CAMS, you know, mental health services for young people, you know, and the government are a nightmare. If you actually look at what makes you happy and less stressed, no offence to mental health services, they definitely have a place, but it's not a mental health nurse or a doctor. It's simple things, you know, like sleep, exercise, diet, gratitude, stuff like that.
And this is another thing, going back to parents and advice, you know, looking at diet for kids, because that has a massive impact.
Yeah, definitely. So as a parent, I would be looking at simple stuff like, are they getting enough sleep? You know, are they reducing their screen time? You know, are they getting iPads given to them to play with even when they're little? You know, is that really the best idea? Thinking about when you give your child a phone, you know, that's massive. You know, I really recommend waiting until their secondary age, which is very difficult because of pressure from their peers and stuff. But we know that once they have a phone, you know, it opens up this whole can of worms, really. You know, if someone has to have a phone, give them a little brick. It doesn't have to be a latest iPhone, does it? You know what I mean?
It's so difficult, isn't it? Because you need to let them be children. You need to let them play and develop that way. And at the same time, if you stop them from having all of these things and watching this, that, the other, be on Instagram, they then the odd one out and they won't fit in at school. It's such a weird, difficult balance.
Yeah, you do have to, and that's why communication is key, because if you have a really good relationship with your child and you're constantly talking, they'll respect you a lot more. They'll be less likely to do things behind your back, you know, setting up profiles, but even in fake names so you can't find them and stuff like that. You know, communication is key. And just like it's a judgment call sometimes. You have to, you know, sometimes trust them to be all right and to use it responsibly, because actually not everyone doesn't use it irresponsibly.
And I think on that note, talking of profiles, do you think that a parent should be added as a friend or as a follower or whatever on social platforms with young people?
Yeah.
Does that not push them then, as you just said, to create a fake one where they put the real stuff?
I've actually asked some young people about this recently, because I was quite interested to see because young people, what I love about them is they're brutally honest.
Yeah. They don't hide it.
What do you think? Do you think your parents should be added? And they don't mind. Most of them don't mind. A lot of them are like, don't really want them to. And I've said, have you ever thought about, you know, doing a fake profile, or do you think people do it? And they say, some people do, but to be honest, it doesn't really happen that much. So that's quite nice to hear.
Yeah, definitely.
mean, at the end of the day, most young people use it responsibly, don't they? It's just that we always hear about the stuff that's a bit more negative, don't we?
So we've spoken about what should be done in terms of, like, looking out for signs and maybe getting someone else involved to talk to the child. We're talking about diet, exercise. Obviously, you've got the other obvious things that a lot of people don't do, which is just like going for a walk to a degree, as opposed to being locked inside. But is there anything that shouldn't be done?
Shouldn't be done. That's an interesting. So yeah, don't judge. I know, and don't presume as well that we know what they're thinking. It's always really important because everyone's experience of mental health is different. You know, my experience of depression could be completely different from someone else's. So it's, we shouldn't try and be an expert, because actually young people hate it when you try and be an expert. Young people love teaching their parents. So don't be the expert. Like, let your child teach you, empower them. That's amazing if they can do that, for sure. And try not to pressure them too much. There's enough pressure in school. They don't really need any more, really. I know you want the best for your child. You don't want to be lazy and stuff like that, like we said a bit earlier on. But it's about having that fine balance, really. I think that's really, really important. Like, another thing as well, as a parent, I would always, even when they're little, start getting them to find their creative outlet or their outlet in some way. So one of my things that I get asked for from schools all the time, they say to me, right, Stacey, if we could just teach one lesson on well-being type subjects, what one lesson, and that's all we can do, what would it be? And my number one thing is coping strategies. So I've helped thousands of people in the past. I used to be a drugs counsellor, used to work with families, young people, adults, prisons, schools. I've done kind of real mix of work. Every single one of them had something in common, and that was they all had poor coping strategies. So I think even from a little age, teach them or get them to try out different things. Because if you think about what your coping strategy is, so mine is like walking down the beach or going to bed early. It doesn't have to be like, oh, I'm going to run a marathon, or I'm going to take up knitting or whatever. There's loads of ideas on the internet. So literally, I used to do it with my niece. Actually, every term I would pay for her to try a different activity out, drumming, learning French, whatever, just to get her to find an outlet and a passion. Because if you have a healthy outlet and a passion for something, you are less likely by far to have a problem with addiction or mental health. So we need to install that as kids, young kids as well.
And I think it's also understanding sometimes that these coping strategies may change, because as you were saying this, I was thinking, what are my coping strategies? If I look at the last sort of 20 years, they have evolved quite definitely. They're not the same necessarily that they were 20 years ago or even 2 years ago.
And it's to also remember that we don't have to have loads as well. When I teach, I do an A to Z. And so we try and think of different coping strategies beginning with every letter of the alphabet. And they say to me, but I don't like loads of them. And I'm like, that's fine. You just need, I would say, try and have 3. And again, there are little things like getting in I know for me, if I'm stressed, I just need to go to bed early and I'm all right, or just get some fresh air, like meditative walking. And
mine used to be baths, just going in the bath. I could stay in the bath for 5 hours.